Hi, this is Erin from MCP Actions, and I'm about to show you the video tutorial for using All in the Details, MCP's action for Photoshop Elements. The first thing you need to do to use this action is install it into Photoshop Elements. When you purchase the action, you will download a folder that contains PDF installation instructions for the action. There are also videos available on mcpactions.com if you would like to watch the video for how to install the action. After installing the action, in Elements you will want to go to your Effects palette and click on the Photo Effects button, which is the third button from the right. And from your drop-down list, look for MCP All in the Details. In today's video, I am using Photoshop Elements 9. However, using Photoshop Elements 5 and up, your functionality is going to be exactly the same and your screen is going to look similar. I'm going to start the tutorial by giving you an overview of the actions that are available in this All in the Details set. First, you have the copyright and the instructions. I won't go through the instructions today, but I do recommend that you run it at least once before you run your first action. There's some very helpful tips in that action for the instructions. Two important things to keep in mind about using All in the Details is that these actions work best on high resolution photos. And you do want to make sure that the photos have been color corrected and that the exposure is correct before running All in the Details. These details actions will bring out the details, and you don't want to bring out details that have poor color or exposure in the first place. So make sure and correct those things before running any of these actions. Now, there are in Photoshop Elements 38 actions total in this set. They're broken up into subgroups. The first subgroup is called the important details, and that would be detail soft color all the way through detail silver lining. These actions are the foundation of the rest of the actions. For most images, you're going to want to start with one of these actions and then run a couple from the next groups if you need any finishing. These important details start with a soft color and detail pop, and then go to a regular color and then an extreme color. And then you go through actions that have various styles like urban, vintage, antique. Sandbox is a nice warm color. Tinted gives you some softer colors. Muted are softer, and faded even more so. And then you have the pastels actions, which you'll note is a two-part action, as well as the mixing bowl. Mixing bowl is a very flexible action that will let you add color washes to your image. And then you've got a copper tone, penny for your thoughts, a mocha, and then two black and whites. Newsprint is similar to a newspaper, and silver lining has a nice silver tone to it. The next section of actions begins with in stark contrast and runs through the extra details action. These are called the additional details, and you can find these breakouts on your instruction PDF called How to Use MCP All in the Details, which came with your action download. In stark contrast adds a separate adjustable layer of contrast to your image if you need a contrast boost. Note that in stark contrast is included in the last few actions, the penny, mocha, newsprint, and silver lining, which are what we call monochromatic images. They're kind of toned. And in stark contrast is included in those, so you won't need to run it. Flashlight brightens the shadows. Binoculars and telescope add edge detail to your images. Telescope is stronger than binoculars. Extra details 1 and 2 are for images that you've already run other actions on. You don't need any sort of color pop, you just need extra details. Extra details 2 is stronger than extra details 1. The last group of actions in this action set are the finishing details, starting with hide and seek. Hide and seek is very similar, but it's not exactly the same to MCP's free action called Touch of Light, Touch of Dark, which you can find on mcpactions.com. This action allows you to paint on lightness or darkness in areas where you need to tone or sculpt your image. Then you have a series of 4 vignettes. Dusty and dirty are both brown tone. Smoky and burnt out are gray or black tones. Dusty and smoky are automatic. Dusty and burnt out are customized, meaning that you can tell the action exactly where you want your vignette to go. Then we have a series of 3 tunnel vision actions, radial, circular, and blur, that allow you to modify the focus of your image. Quiet the noise and quiet the band can be used if these actions bring out unwanted noise or banding details. If you have an image that might have very light noise or banding in the first place, these details actions might emphasize that, so you can use these two to reduce it. The last 2 actions in the set are high definition sharpening and crystal clear web resize and sharpening. High definition sharpening is a great adjustable sharpening action that you use on images that are going to be printed. Crystal clear web resize and sharpening is an adjustable sharpening action as well, but you use it on images that are only going to be viewed over computer monitors. This action applies sharpening that is good for screens, and it also resizes your images to 900 pixels wide. Which is a good image size for displaying your images on computer monitors. Okay, now I'm going to go through a few of these actions using images. I'm going to start with this picture of a man sitting in his workshop with his dog. And I am going to run on it the details color action. So to run the action, I'm going to make sure first that my image is flattened. If it's not flattened, I would right-click on the background layer and select Flatten Image. I also want to make sure that the layer that we have is called Background. I'm going to double-click on Details Color and watch it on the Layers palette as it processes the action. For every message that I get in Photoshop Elements when running actions, it's important to always press the Continue button. If you press Stop, it will undo your action. And this message says to adjust the opacity of the layers to taste, paint on the layer mask if necessary, and when it's adjusted to taste, play the Detail Finder action. Now, this all in the detail set, the actions work together. For several actions, you will be prompted to run Detail Finder, which is over here, number 7 in your effects palette. And the actions that go before this one, Soft Color, Color, Extreme Color, and Urban, will not be complete until you run the Detail Finder. And you'll be prompted in all the messages to run Detail Finder. So I'm going to press Continue. Going to look at my layers over here, and I think probably this one is a bit too bright, so I'm going to reduce the opacity of the extra brightness layer by about 50%. Shadow contrast I like, and the secret look, which finds some of the edges in the photo, I like that as well. So I'm happy with this set of layers, and I'm now going to finish the action by running Detail Finder. So I double click on it, and now it's telling me to brush with white to erase detail using a white airbrush. So I'll press Continue here. And what this is saying basically is that there may be too much detail now in specific areas of the image. I usually personally don't like to have too much detail on the face of people and even their skin in general. So I think what I will do is use the brush to erase some of the detail from the man and also the puppy, because we do want puppies to be soft rather than harsh as well. So to do that, I'm going to select my paintbrush. I want it to be a soft, round brush, an airbrush. And I'm going to choose about 100 pixels. I think that'll be good. I want my foreground color to be white. And the instructions in that last message said to use an opacity of about 30 to 40%. So with my black layer mask selected, I'm going to paint white over the man's face and arms, as well as the puppy, just to remove a bit of the detail and make those natural parts of the image look a bit softer. You can see now in my layer mask where I painted in gray, which is my low opacity white brush, to remove the details. You can also adjust the strength of the details by adjusting the opacity of this adjust opacity layer. You can make them very strong, which is much too strong obviously, but I think somewhere right in the 20s is good for that particular image. Okay, next I'm going to use this cute picture of a little girl in a truck. I'm going to run the extreme color action. So double clicking on the action, you'll see over here that it does go through all its steps. And the thing about this action is that I will need to paint with white on the extreme color layer to bring out the color. So I will hit continue, and I am going to adjust the opacity of my brush up to 100. I'm going to make the brush size larger as well by pressing my left facing square bracket key, which is above the enter key on my keyboard, and just double checking that white is selected and my extreme color layer mask is outlined in white. That's what means that it's active for editing. And I am going to just brush over the areas of color that I want to emphasize in the truck. Really makes the color in the window and the metal pop out. Okay, and I missed this. I actually painted over the girl's elbow a bit, and we definitely don't want to use this extreme color on skin because it brings out red tones too much. So I'm going to make my brush smaller. I'm going to type X, which will shift my foreground and background colors. So now with black as my foreground color, I'm going to erase the extreme color that I painted onto her skin. Now that the color is adjusted as I like it, I am going to finish by running the detail finder. And for this image, I'm not going to want any details at all in her skin. So I am going to keep my brush at 100% opacity, even though the preceding message said to use a lower opacity brush. And here I am going to be painting in white. It says brush with white to erase details on this layer. So I've got my brush selected, the foreground color is white, and I'm going to make the brush just a bit bigger and erase the details all over the girl here. Make my brush a bit smaller as I get down to the smaller areas of her elbow. And that is it. Let me show you before and after on this image so that you can see the way the color and the details in the truck popped out. There's a before, there's an after. Huge difference. The last thing I'm going to do over this image is to apply a vignette. And I am going to run right here the dusty high-res brown vignette. So I'm going to double click. It will flatten my image and apply the vignette automatically. Note that you can change the opacity of your vignette. You can make it darker or you can make it lighter. You also have a layer mask so that if the vignette has spilled onto the subject a bit, you can use a white brush and erase it. So I might just actually use a black brush to erase it. So I'm going to make sure that there's no vignette right here on the girl. And you can see over here on the layer mask that those changes are reflected. Now for the next image, I'm going to use this picture of a girl sitting on railroad tracks. And I'm going to start with the antique details action. So I'm going to double click it to run. Note that on this action, you don't need to finish with the detail finder. The details are automatically popped out in this action. And again, if I want to erase some of the details from the girl's face, I can. I'm going to reduce the size of my brush, and I paint with white here to erase the details. I think that was probably too strong, so I'm going to type Control Z to undo that brush stroke, and I'm going to bring the opacity of the brush down to about 40% to remove some of the details from her face. So I am happy with that adjustment. Next, I want to show you the mixing bowl action. This is a different two-part action, so I'm going to undo details. I'm going to scroll down here to Details, Mixing Bowl Part 1, double click to run it. And as it processes here, it will give me options of what color tones I want to apply to the image. First off, I'm going to bring down the brightness and fading just a bit. I think that's better. Really brings out the ice that's on the rocks there. And then I'm just going to play with the colors. That's blue spice. This is mint, nutmeg, and cinnamon. I kind of like the blue tone look that the cinnamon layer gives it. I might turn on the mint. No. Note that you can mix and match these layers if you'd like to. I really like it just like that. So I've got the cinnamon layer selected. I think the opacity is fine, and I don't need to mask it off her face at this time, although I could. So I'm happy with part 1. I'm now going to run part 2 of Mixing Bowl, which flattens the image and applies the detail. And I like this one just the way it is. I don't think I'm going to change it at all. I'm going to run a vignette action on this one as well. This time I'm going to run the Burnt Out Custom Black Vignette. So burnt out is a black or gray tone, and you actually tell elements where you want the vignette to be. So I'm going to double click. I get a message saying that I should press stop and use the lasso tool to very loosely select my subject, then replay the action. So I'm pressing stop, and I am selecting my lasso tool, and very loosely, I don't want to get too close to the subject herself. I'm just going to outline her with the lasso tool. Doesn't have to be a neat line at all. Now I'm going to rerun the action, and this time I'll press continue. Now, once you do this a few times, you can start by drawing with the lasso and press continue so that you don't have to run the action twice, but you're not going to hurt it at all. Okay, now I'm going to press continue. You can see that my vignette has been added. This image was not quite a high enough resolution to use this action perfectly. So what I'm going to do is take my black brush, I'm going to select my brush again, and type X to change the foreground color to black. And now I'm just going to erase some of the vignetting over the girl and right around her. So this action does work best on images that have a very high resolution. You can see there on the layer mask that the changes you make to the vignette are reflected. You can also change the opacity of these layers to darken the vignette that's remaining if you want to. So that's a very smoky look right there. Now I'm going to run one more action on this image. So I'm undoing all my changes, and I want to show you what the newsprint black and white looks like. So press continue. Note that your detail layers are already there, and you also have this additional in stark contrast layer. You can turn it off if your image is contrasty enough. I like it on in this particular image. And I can brush with white to erase the detail on the girl's face, but I don't even think it's necessary. Okay, now the last action that I'm going to demonstrate is the tunnel vision actions. This is a wedding shot, and I believe Sandbox has been run on it already. I am going to go down here and choose Tunnel Vision Radial. So I'm going to double click to run, and it tells me that when the next box pops up, I need to set the amount to 25 to 45% and then select zoom and good. Also move the blur center to where you want your main point of focus. So I pressed continue and I get this box. So I'm going to move the amount of the blur to about 25%. And I'm going to put the blur method on zoom, and I check that the quality is at good. I am also going to click and drag to move the focal center to just about where the couple's faces are. It doesn't have to be exact. So I'll hit OK. And you can see that the blur has now been added to the image. Now, what you want to do here is use a brush of 2 opacities. You want to brush with 2 opacities. I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger here, and with my opacity almost all the way, maybe at 85–90%, I'm going to put 1 brush stroke over the main part of the couple, because I want very little of the blur to be on them. So I'm just erasing it with a black brush and a high opacity brush. Now I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger. Again, I'm clicking on the left facing square bracket key. I'm going to adjust my opacity to about 30% or so. And now I'm just going to paint along the outer edges of the couple. And this will help the blur fade in and out nicely and naturally. And you can see over here on my layer mask that it's darker where I painted with the high opacity brush, and it's lighter where I painted with the low opacity brush. So that is it for this All in the Details tutorial. If you have any questions, you can email me. My email address is erin@mcpactions.com, or you can go to the MCP website where there's a FAQ section. And also make sure and check the instructions that came with your file download. Thank you for watching these videos, and enjoy your new action.